Hello everyone, and thank you for taking the time to click on this video. Today I want to highlight and review an opinion article authored by Joseph Stiglitz that was published on October 31st, 2020 in the New York Times. Now for those of you who may not be aware, Joseph Stiglitz is a professor at Columbia University and is the 2001 Nobel Prize recipient in economic science. Now, he wrote a very eye-opening article that claims Republicans, not Democrats, and certainly not President-elect Biden, are about to raise our taxes in 2021. So let's take a closer look. Professor Stiglitz writes that in 2017, President Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which most of us can recall lowered our taxes. However, there was a dirty little secret buried deep inside, which has already been signed and sealed by President Trump. President Trump deliberately signed a bill that had built-in tax increases for most Americans beginning in 2021, except for those at the very top. The law they passed initially lowered taxes for most Americans, but it built in automatic stepped tax increases every 2 years that begin in 2021 and that by 2027 would affect nearly everyone but people at the top of the economic hierarchy. All taxpayer income groups with incomes of $75,000 or under, which accounts for about 65% of all taxpayers, will face a higher tax rate in 2027 than they did in 2019, and it's all because of President Trump's law that he signed in 2017. For most, in fact, it's a delayed tax increase dressed up as a tax cut. How many times have you heard Trump and his allies actually mention that? They surmised correctly so far that if they waited to add the tax increase until after the 2020 election, few of the people most affected were likely to remember who was responsible. In fact, President Trump is likely counting on that. Now, taking a look at the analysis of the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Committee on Taxation at the time the December 2017 tax bill was enacted by President Trump, we see very clearly how different income groups are affected by the Trump tax plan. And quite frankly, it's very disturbing. The current poverty line for a family of four is $26,200. And people with incomes between $10,000 and $30,000, which accounts for nearly 1/4 of Americans, are among those scheduled to pay a higher tax average rate in 2021 than in years before the tax cut was passed. Now, the CBO and Joint Committee estimated that those with an income of $20,000 to $30,000 would owe an extra $365 next year. These are people who are struggling just to pay rent and put food on the table. Now, looking at this graph in a little bit more detail, by 2027, when the law's provisions are set to be fully enacted, with the stealth tax increases complete, the country will be neatly divided into two groups. Those making over $100,000 will on average get a tax cut, and those earning under $100,000 and income bracket encompassing 3/4 of taxpayers will not. At the same time, the law signed by President Trump has given the wealthy citizens of our country, people with an annual incomes in excess of $1 million, a huge gift. The Joint Committee on Taxation estimated the average tax rate in 2019 for this group to be 2.3 percentage points lower than before the tax cut, saving the average taxpayer in this group over $64,000, more than the average American family makes in 1 year. The tax loss and benefit estimates just described were calculated before the pandemic. Now, incomes for almost everyone but top earners have taken a hit, so the loser group will likely be considerably larger than anticipated, with people like Jeff Bezos, the billionaire chief executive of Amazon, doing even better than expected. Trump's gift to him is even bigger than he could possibly have anticipated. The analysis makes clear that the vast majority of Americans will be better off with the likely tax reforms that will emerge from a Biden administration than they would be by sticking with Trump's ill-conceived tax bill. You might well ask, why didn't Mr. Trump just give everyone a tax cut? The answer is rather simple. The Republican Party is no longer concerned with fiscal conservatism. That went out the door in 2017. The tax cuts they promised these donors produced projections that the resulting budget deficits were well beyond $1 trillion. Yes, Republicans were proposing a deficit over $1 trillion. To reduce that stomach churning amount while at the same time pleasing their rich friends, they had to phase in higher taxes on ordinary Americans. While this kind of budget gimmickry has been used before under President George W. Bush, Mr. Trump carried it to a new level. Projections show that when the 2017 bill's temporary tax cuts change to tax increases, growth would likely slow significantly and wage increases would be anemic. And those calculations were made before the pandemic hit. Now, Mark Zandi and Bernard Yados of Moody's Analytics have done the most credible and thorough analysis comparing the Biden and Trump plans, including Trump's stealth increases in other promised tax and expenditure changes. Biden's plan wins by an enormous margin: 7.4 million more jobs and a much quicker recovery from this recession. That means higher wages and incomes for most Americans. Elections matter. Elections gave Republicans the power to enact these tax shenanigans. Neither conscience nor principles stop them. The problem now is that unless the Democrats can win a majority in the Senate, these Republican tax increases, already legislated, are likely to go into effect. The increases, unfair, aimed at the vast majority of Americans who are disproportionately suffering in the pandemic, will cause even more hardship. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for taking the time to click on this video. Please comment below if you have any feedback, if you like or dislike what has been discussed in this video. Like the video if you'd like to help me destroy the YouTube algorithm. And until next time, YouTube, be well.